Okay, so one of the lessons for today is angles in the coordinate plane. So this is a refresher from what we did this last year, but let's look at it. When we think of angles in the coordinate plane, and we're given questions like if sine is greater than 0 and tangent is less than 0, in what quadrant does theta lie? We know we're thinking about the signs of trig functions. So let's just put them down. We know that we have positive here, right? That's sine, cosine. Negative, positive, negative, negative, positive, negative. But there's a better way, remember, that we have this little mnemonic, all, take, calculus, which tells us where everything is positive. Cosine is positive in first and fourth, sine is positive in the first and the second, tangent is positive in the first and the third, because when you take, remember this is the cosine and this is the sine, and when you divide a negative by a negative, you get a positive. So tangent is positive here. So this, all students take calculus, we remember. So then when we ask these questions, if sine is greater than 0, well, that means it's got to be quadrant 1 or 2. And tangent is less than 0, so that has to be quadrant 2 or 4. Well, if those things are both true, in what quadrant does theta lie? Theta is in quadrant 2, right? Because both of those conditions can be true in quadrant 2. So if cosine is less than 0, well, that's going to be quadrant 2 and 3. Tangent less than 0, quadrant 2 and 4. Therefore, where does theta lie? Theta is in quadrant 2. All right, I'm going to leave that one for you guys to do on your own. Now let's look at this problem. If sine of theta is negative 4/5 and theta is in quadrant 3, what is the tangent? All right, the way we go about solving these problems is we draw. Always when in doubt, draw. So I'm going to draw, first of all, I know I'm going to draw an angle in quadrant 3. So I draw a little coordinate plane. In quadrant 3, I draw an angle into the quadrant. I always put my theta as the angle made with the x-axis, and now I'm going to do a little dotted line down. There's my triangle in the third quadrant. And the question says, if the sine of theta is 4/5, well, 4, it's opposite over hypotenuse. That's what sine is. So this has to be 4, and the hypotenuse has to be 5. But then I think this is negative because it's going down, so this is negative 4/5. The question is asking me, what is the tangent? Well, the tangent is the opposite over the adjacent, so I don't know the adjacent side. But I know the Pythagorean theorem, so I set out to find the adjacent side. X squared plus negative 4 squared equals 5 squared. A squared plus b squared is c squared. X squared plus 16 equals 25. Subtract 16 from both sides, and I get x squared equals 9. X equals 3. Okay, now the question is it positive or negative? Well, I write it over here. X is equal to 3. Now it's going in the negative direction, so x is negative 3. So what is the tangent of theta? The tangent of theta, go to your drawing, is opposite 4 over adjacent 3, and tangent is positive in the third quadrant. Also, if I just write it like this, it's negative 4 over negative 3. A negative divided by a negative is positive. So the answer to this question is the tangent of theta is 4/3. Let's do another one. So we have the cosine of theta is 12 over 13, and we see that the cosine is positive, so that limits it to quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. And theta is in quadrant 4. Okay, that limits it even further. So let's sketch an angle into quadrant 4, where the angle is always made with the horizontal. We draw, and we look. Cosine of theta. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 12 over 13. So the adjacent next to side is 12, and the hypotenuse is 13. And this is the side I don't know. The question is, what is the sine? Well, the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, so I must find x. And I know it's going to be negative because it's going down. So I use Pythagorean theorem. X squared plus 13 squared, x squared plus 12 squared equals 13 squared. X squared plus 12 squared is 144. equals 169, 13 squared. Subtract 144 from both sides, and I get x squared equals 25. X equals 5. I know it's negative 5 because that's where it's located. Now I'm ready to say the sign. The sign of theta, go back and look at your picture, is opposite over hypotenuse, negative 5 over 13. Okay? That's the sign of theta. All right, so you guys try this problem on your own. You can come up and check for answers.